In a world where most of the popular video game characters have stylized proportions, you must be wondering, why? Why, Jason, do we still need to study anatomy? Well, kids, even stylized characters need to follow the laws of nature. Imagine a character so weird and abstract, and it's nothing we have seen before. The audience will have a difficult time relating to it because there is simply no point of reference to our real world. When designing characters, you need to observe how human anatomy works. By knowing the rules, you can then pick and choose which ones to bend. I'll be producing 2 videos for the human figure chapter. In this first video, I will be focusing on structure. We will be discussing the basic proportion of the human figure, how to deconstruct the human figure, and the skeleton and muscle that makes up the human figure. As with learning how to draw the head, it is important to know about the basic proportions of the human figure. The first point is that the ideal human character should be 8 heads tall. Using the head as a unit of measurement is something that artists do all the time, and different artists use different models. For example, the classical Lumious model is a 7.5 heads tall figure. However, I think that the 8 heads model is the easier one to learn and the easier one to remember. Therefore, I would suggest that we go with the 8 head model for the purpose of this lesson. Since we are using the head as a unit of measurement, it will make sense that the character will look bigger if the head is smaller. For example, comic book hero characters can go up to 9 or even 10 heads tall. Using this 8 head model, we can actually subdivide the human figure into 8 equal parts, and each of this equal part would be consisting of a single head length. The first head length is, of course, the length of the head. The second head length extends all the way to the nipple. Do take note that the female nipples are slightly lower due to the forces of gravity. The third head length extends all the way to the belly button, otherwise known as the navel. The fourth head length extends all the way to the crotch or groin area. 2 head lengths down and we will reach the knees. And lastly, 2 head lengths down, you will reach the bottom of the feet. The next point is that the upper arm is slightly longer than the lower arm. However, this difference is very small. So to make things easier for you to remember, you can simply recall it as equal length. The length of the hand is equivalent to the length from the hairline to the jawline. An easy way to remember this is that you can basically cover your entire face when you place your palm over it. The next point is that the elbow is aligned to the 9th rib. To locate the 9th rib, it's basically the rib that is jutting out the most. The groin and not the hip is actually the midpoint of the human body. The next point, the upper leg is the same length as the lower leg, making the knee the midpoint of the lower body. Do note the angle on the lower arm, the lower leg, and the ankle. This is important because I noticed that a lot of beginners like to simplify the legs and the arms into symmetrical cylindrical forms, which is wrong. Lastly, the feet is approximately the same length as the head. And this is the full 7.15 figure cheat sheet. Please remember them by heart. Just like the head, you can simplify the human body into geometrical shapes, like the drawing that you see over here. This not only simplifies the process of drawing the complex human body, it also informs the artist on how to shape the figure. One thing to note is that the human body is naturally curvy at the back. You can observe this from the shape of the spine. The common misconception is that the spine is straight, but in reality, the spine actually curves and bends around certain areas. There are multiple methods of simplifying the human body. My model incorporates elements from the art mannequin and the skeletal and muscular structure of the human body. Whatever your approach is, it is important to take note of the proportions of each individual part in relation to the whole body. If you are still unsure, please refer to the proportion segment earlier. Being able to visualize the body in primitive 3D shapes like this will make the transition to the task of modeling a 3D human character that much easier. Understanding how the art mannequin articulates will also help to guide you as you plan your model's topology, rigging, and the animation process. Take note that while I simplified the elbow and the knee to a sphere, it does not mean that the hands and legs can move in a way that is similar to a toy with a ball joint. The elbow and the knee is, strictly speaking, a hinge joint where the rotation of the said body parts are restricted to one axis. I won't go too much in detail for this, but just take note of that when you are animating your character in future. As mentioned earlier, another perk of being able to deconstruct your human figure in this way is that you will be able to understand the volumes a bit more, and it'll give you a better idea on how to shape the figure and the location of the plane breaks. Lastly, this process is also beneficial when you want to draw your human figures in a different pose. Dealing with foreshortening on an abstract shape like the thigh, for example, becomes much easier when you simplify it to become a cylinder. One last thing I want to point out is that even though I simplified the human figure into basic forms like this, when I'm drawing the cylinder for the thigh, for example, I am not drawing a symmetrical cylinder. Instead, I am observing how the form tapers, where it's bigger near the groin and it gets smaller closer to the knee. This change is also observed for the lower leg, the upper arm, and the lower arm. So take note and do not draw symmetrical cylinders for these forms. Before we move on to skeletons and muscles, I just want to briefly speak about hands and feet. When observing a person, we tend to look at three main things: their face, their body posture, and their hand gesture. Thus, it is important to get hands to look right. I have talked and demoed how to draw hands in previous lectures. So in this lecture, I will just touch on one final point when it comes to drawing the hands, specifically the fingers. The fingers can be subdivided in this manner. Next, I'll briefly talk about the foot. To be very honest, for a very long time I was afraid of drawing feet. In my illustrations, I will try to find ways and means to cover the feet, be it using environment elements, using effects like smoke, or just the overall placement of the figure. But knowing how to draw feet well is actually very important. It's something that you cannot escape when you are making turnaround drawings for your own character designs in the future. One thing to note about feet is that when drawing them, take note that there is an arc on the side that is facing inwards towards your body. The side that is facing outwards should be flat. While you do not need to identify the individual bones and muscles by their names, well, at least not right now, it is our duty as artists to know where they are positioned, how do they articulate, and what are their functions. This will enable us to create more believable designs in the future. The first question I want to ask you is, which part of the body are the bones most prominent? A hint I can give you is that bones are generally hard and muscles and fats are softer. Go ahead, touch yourself to find out. The following diagram lists out some of the bony landmarks that can be found on the body. Like I mentioned, there's no need to actually memorize this entire list. But what can be applied for your drawing is as shown in this next diagram, where the artist used a different line quality to indicate the difference between the muscle and a bone. In this example, the muscles are represented with curved and flowy lines, whereas the bones are represented with angular and sometimes straight lines. Applying this on your human drawings will make them more lively and more appealing to look at. Next, I will demonstrate how to apply these muscular forms on top of the deconstructed human figure that we did earlier. Before I move on to the demo, I just want to point out one last thing. When laying muscles over the figure, always overlap the curves. This is because that's how the muscles are layered on the human body as well. They are overlapping one another. And just as a gentle reminder, do not leave the arms and legs as symmetrical cylinders. Okay, I will start with the male torso first. For the male torso, I will include in the neck area, a little bit of the shoulder and the groin as well. I will start off by deconstructing the torso area using the model that I have shown you earlier. This process allows me to quickly block out how large I think each area should be. Once I'm happy with that, I can then move on to inserting the muscle groups. Right now I'm drawing in the sternomastoid. It's basically the neck muscle. It has this V shape that connects the head to the clavicle. Okay, notice that the pectorals or the chest is connected to the shoulder muscles, the deltoids. For this exercise, we are leaving out the arms so that you can draw in the side of the body as well. In this demonstration, I am still simplifying the forms. If you really go very detailed, the serratus or the side of the torso below the pectorals is actually kind of like a thin shape. Alright, when I draw the hip area, I like to have two curves like this. The first curve is actually the side of the pelvis that is jutting out. When drawing nipples, just take note of the orientation. It's not right smack in the middle of the pectoral. It's actually located more towards the sides. Alright, moving on to the female torso. Same as the male torso, I will start off by deconstructing. When I'm drawing this, I am also taking note of the curve of the body. We will move on to discuss about gesture in the next video, but I would just want to highlight that to you right now. Okay, once I have the deconstruction in place, I can then plant in all the muscle groups. Like I mentioned, whatever I'm doing right now is still kind of like a stylized approach. I am omitting certain details in favor of making this exercise a little bit simpler. At the end of the day, we are trying to highlight the human body in its most attractive state, and sometimes creating or drawing too many lines, detailing too much of the muscular form actually makes the body less not appealing to look at. Okay, while drawing this female body, this female torso, I want you guys to actually draw the naked form instead of what you see over here in the reference photo. And the reason why I can't show you a naked female reference is because I think YouTube will block the video. But over here I am trying to show you how to properly draw the breast. I think a lot of beginners, they like to draw breasts in kind of like these two spherical watermelon shapes, and that is wrong. It looks very funny, it looks odd. To properly draw the breast, you have to imagine it kind of like a teardrop shape. So the simplest way to see it is imagine the model is wearing some kind of a bikini or undergarment, like a bra. Okay, in my previous deconstruction, I think I drew the body to be a little bit too long, so I edited it. Similar to the male torso, the way you place the nipples, just make sure that it's kind of facing more towards the side rather than right smack in the middle. Alright, moving along, we will be drawing the back. And for the back, we'll just I'll just do an example of using the male back. As with always, I am deconstructing the figure first before I add in the muscle forms. I think that this is a less complicated approach, because during this phase you are just thinking about the proportions and the overall form rather than being too concerned about drawing the muscle definitions. Okay, to the side of this drawing, I am making a very quick sketch of how the human body will look like on the side view. And once again, just as a reminder, the human spine is not straight. It is bending and curving, kind of in this fashion. So when drawing the human body on the side view, especially during turnaround drawings later on in your character designs, please take note of this curve. I don't want to see like straight backs in your future character turnarounds. So, just like the breast, I find that a lot of people like to simplify the butts, the buttocks, into like very spherical forms, when in fact it's more of a kind of like a saggy. I wouldn't say it's a teardrop shape, but it's like a sphere that is sagging downwards. Remember, the force of gravity is acting on all these masses. Okay, the next part that I'll be working on will be the arms. For your job sheet, you only need to do one view. But just as a demonstration, I'm doing all three views over here. The reference image is from a ZBrush sculpt, if I'm not wrong. Usually it's best to work off a reference photo when it comes to studying. But I thought this sculpt was pretty decent. It's not done by me, obviously, but I thought that the proportions, the details are quite accurate, so I used it to show you guys. Unless there's a very complicated kind of hand gesture that the person is making, I tend to simplify the palm to form a shape of a mitten. Okay, I just want to point out that the shoulder muscles or the deltoid is actually kind of like a diamond shape. So is the bicep. Just to tell a little bit of a backstory, I started drawing by learning anatomy from Dragon Ball comics. Believe it or not, I was a huge fan of Dragon Ball when I was young, and it took me a very long time to break the habit of drawing Dragon Ball like muscles. The problem with learning from a stylized reference like a manga or anime or even Marvel comics, the problem with that is that you are learning from another artist's way of drawing, and the artist probably already went through the basics of learning the actual human anatomy and selected the things that he or she wants to add or subtract from the quote-unquote accurate human anatomy drawing style. So to have your own style, you do have to learn from nature and then make your own decisions on what you want to add or subtract in your own artwork. Anyway, the lower arm muscle is kind of in the shape of a Y. So do remember that when you are drawing the lower arm next time. Quite quite a number of people don't know this, but the tricep is actually way bigger than that of the bicep. And I think this is because when you look at comics, you look at the character from the front view, and artists love to like exaggerate, how huge the biceps are. But the triceps actually they are, for an average human being, it is bigger than that of the bicep. As the name suggests, the bicep has, strictly speaking, two muscles. The triceps have three muscles. As you can see over here, it is kind of divided into 1, 2, and 3 muscle groups. Next up, we have the front view of the leg. For your job sheet, you just need to do this view, but I'll demonstrate the back view later on as well. Okay, for the thigh, just take note how the muscles kind of wrap around this form, and how it merges into the kneecap. The lower leg actually tapers towards the front, where the kneecap is. Where the shin is. It's actually pretty bony in that area. You can feel your lower leg. Take note of the angles of where the ankles and the calves are supposed to be tilting. And finally, we have the back of the leg. Once again, take note of the angles of the calf and the ankle. Do note of the angles of the thigh and the calves as a whole as well. It's actually tapering from a bigger circumference to a smaller circumference from the top to the bottom. So the thigh is thicker, closer to the butt area, and it's thinner towards the knee. And the calf is thicker towards the knee and thinner towards the ankle. Do note how bony looking the heel area, the area above the heel is. Wow, Lawrence, you have a body now. You're all grown up. To summarize today's lesson, we studied the basic proportion of the human body. We also learned how to deconstruct the figure. Lastly, we learned about the skeletal and muscular structure of the human body. Now, the problem with learning just the structure of the human body is that your drawings will end up looking very stiff, kind of like Lawrence over here. And again, no offense, dude. To breathe life into your figure drawing, you need to know one more concept: gesture. We'll cover that during the next video. In the meantime, enjoy studying the human figure, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!